one of the guitars is kind of out of tune.
It's quiet in the background.
But when it comes in here,
it's right here. Like I can hear Darlin on the like right after that. I hear Darlin.
That is super thick.
yeah, they're all. It's like Surfer Girl. It's like there is no real lead vocalist because they're all at this point of the chorus. They're all singing.
Yeah.
So it's like where do you, and then. But then they break out. Let's listen to a little bit of Brian's lead by himself. He's really good at singing.
All right, welcome back to the In My Beach Boys Room podcast. I am Adam Schreiner. I am sitting here with Matthew Hartz, and I have his brother John Hartz here with us today. So last time John Hartz was here, we did the Little Do Scoop album. Mm-hmm. Had a lot of good feedback, John, so we brought you back. So welcome back. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get into the
party. Have a party today.
Yeah, we're going to get into the party album, which I'm glad you're here, John, because this, we'll get into it, but this one, as far as like the music goes, I guess a lot of times when we do these analysis, I have like these like mind-blowing moments from the Beach Boys, and I didn't really have that on this one, so I don't know, I was having a hard time talking about the music, so obviously I know Matthew will get us, we'll take care of a lot of the music stuff, but I'm glad John's here to kind of give a different opinion, because as I was doing my notes, I was like, wow, this is not my best work on the notes here. So real quick, let's get into all the housekeeping stuff. You can just follow us on YouTube. Obviously, that's where we do most of our social media stuff. Matthew does have Matthew Hartz Music on Instagram, and then you can just look him up on Facebook, Matthew Hartz. And then it's actually him and John.
A picture of us. That's the profile picture.
That's the profile
just
picture.
Of us I'm 7 and he's 5, so for two kids.
Two kids.
Little kids.
Yeah. So
one's got a banjo.
So, but like I said, we don't do a ton on the social media. We do the YouTube stuff, but it's there if you want to go check it out and like and do all that stuff. So, we are getting into the party album today. But
yes.
First, let's acknowledge our sponsors. Once again, this is why we can get these episodes out quick. We had Michael Hoyt once again.
Wow,
Michael. We call him a serial sponsor at this point.
That's really, it's above and beyond, Michael. Thank you so much.
Yep, and then Bill Kaprowski?
Kaprowski, yes, my buddy Bill from originally from the Pennsylvania, but he's lives in Maryland now, and he came out to see me with Asleep at the Wheel last fall, and so anyway, he sponsored. Thank you very, very much, Bill.
Yeah, I mean it's awesome when we see those come in.
And also, we want to let everybody know that Summer Days and Summer Nights episode is our fastest growing episode. We appreciate you guys liking and subscribing and sharing whatever you're doing to drive
whatever
these
it is,
things, because we're videos are starting to really perform well, and so we really appreciate it, and we really appreciate the donations, and if you're able to, it is helping facilitate us to make time to do this, and so please, and we know you've got the QR code. We'll
throw the QR code up,
and then also to remember that you can just email us for an address if you just want to send a check.
Yeah,
we've had people do that also. So
no problem at all. On we accept all forms of payment here. So that's pretty much it. I have
one other special announcement.
Oh, yeah.
It was announced this last week that Brian, the guy that is the MC on the concert album, the young kid Fred Vale that I've talked about so much, people don't know it, but about the time of Sunflower, Brian made a country album with Fred and had Fred be the vocalist on it. And it was the last thing in the world I ever thought would get an official release, but there was articles in Rolling Stone and several other big music publications that album is going to be released this year. And this is, it's a really unexpected, but I'm glad for Fred Vale, and I'm really interested to see what all comes out, because I haven't heard all of it. I've heard spots of it, but it's
exciting.
So there's the name of the project is called Cows in the Pasture, but I believe it's a new. I don't know who the new young producer is, but they brought in a really hot producer, and he's bringing in some big time guests and everything to finish it up. And so it's pretty big news in Beach Boy world. And of course, we still want to send our condolences to Brian about Melinda. He's still in the wake of that big time. And so, but I wanted to make mentions of Cows in the Pasture coming out. And I think that this is where Brian met some of the country and bluegrass musicians that he and Carl would go on to use in some of the early 70s Beach Boy records too. I think so.
Sunflower being my favorite album. I'm curious now as well. And they don't have a release date, just later this year sometime?
I think it might even be 2025.
Oh, okay.
But anyway.
But it's on the way.
That's a little announcement. And then before we get into the party album, I have something I need to address, and I'm glad I remembered this. Folks, in the beginning of December, I quit Asleep at the Wheel. It was an unfortunate situation, and that's all I'm going to say about it at this point, but it was a wonderful year, and the experiences were just off the charts. But I want to let everybody know that, just in case there's people wanting to thinking that we're coming through and I might be with them. So I'm not with them anymore, but I am doing a bunch of other stuff this year, and I've already got dates booked with other people, and I'll be back in Boston and some on the West Coast, and so we'll keep everybody updated. But I just want to let everybody know that.
Yeah, and if you are one of those people that did like to, follow Matthew and his musical career, you can just go to MatthewHartzMusic.com. His calendar will be up there with all the updated dates of when they're finalized, and see if he's coming to a venue near you. So, but I think.
Are you ready to party?
Let's party. Beach Boys party time. Right. So yeah, get us. Like I said, I have questions about the album as a whole, but I feel like the setup might answer a few of those. So I'll let you go ahead and get it all set up, and then we'll go from there. What
I thought would be cool to do first is go over the album cover and the packaging, which I don't think we've been doing enough with the covers on these things, because that's big. When John and I were growing up, these things were the visuals. These were important to the listening experience. But John and I had a reissue growing up that didn't have the gatefold. This is an original pressing, but it does have a gatefold with more of the party pictures. There's an Orange Crush soda in there. The front of it says that there's fan photos inside. Beach Boy fan photos, full cover. You can put that back. And here I've kind of attached them to this thing. They're like playing cards, but they're really nice color, really vivid. All just the party shots. Let's see. Capitol also sent 1 million bags of Beach Boy Party branded potato chips out to promote this album to record stores and stuff. So some of the people have been looking for them on eBay for years to see if there's an unopened bag of them someplace. But they also sent, the Beach Boys have been hugely successful for Capitol, and so they also sent out a big fancy in-store display piece for the Beach Boys that featured 5 of their albums, and I've seen pictures of Brian standing next to this thing. But anyway,
hey, wait, hold on. Potato chips. So there's not. Have you seen anything?
I've seen pictures of the wrapping.
Okay, the wrapping, but
1 million bags too.
Okay,
were shipped out.
And so, but you have yet to have you seen anybody who has like an unopened bag?
What kind of potato chips?
Yeah,
I'm sure. I think they're just plain. I'll show you. I think they were just plain potato chips. They probably, if you could, wouldn't be any good right now.
No. I mean, at this point, I don't think.
I think it'd be cool if some of these, like, if Lay's took it and said, like, we're gonna reissue this bag of potato chips, or like Wheaties reissued the Bruce Jenner, like just different stuff like that. Would be cool. I think people would eat it up.
Yeah, nice play there.
Another thing about the cover, the guitars that Carl, Al, and Dennis are strumming on the covers that are actually on the album, those are not used on the album. And there's a really funky looking acoustic electric 12 string. There's a Martin 6 string that's a concert sized guitar that Carl's holding. But there's also, I've got to start by this, there's a tenor guitar in the picture, which is a really obscure instrument that was used by the Kingston Trio. So it might make sense that Al might know what one is. I just think they just happened to have one. But most of the guys are pictured in this on the Party album playing a tenor guitar, which I guarantee you none of them knew how to play in its regular tuning.
Oh, yeah.
I'm real familiar with the tenor guitar because it's used in fiddle music, and it's a really unique instrument that in its regular tuning, it's tuned like a cello, but you can also tune it a couple different ways, and people have used them. But I find it just kind of funny that's the guitar that's the main one that's featured on the album is not even the type of guitar that would have been used.
And I've seen your tenor guitar before. Is it a 6-string?
No, it's small, and it's a 4-string
That's
guitar.
what I thought.
Yes,
So it's like a oversized ukulele kind of, right? Like
yeah, kind of. Yeah, exactly. It's in that neighborhood. The girlfriends / wives on the cover. I think most of there were actually wives. Brian and Marilyn were married at this point. There's lots of pictures of Marilyn singing on the record. Dennis and Carol, his first wife. There's some nice pictures of them on the back, especially. And then Al and Linda Jardine, when I don't know if they were married yet. There's also there's a picture of Bruce. He's playing volleyball on the back. So Bruce is on this album, but he can't be on the covers yet because of the contract thing. And then Ron Swallow, the guy that was playing tambourine on a lot of summer days and summer nights, is back with he's in a lot of the pictures. And there's a lot of their current friends that are kind of included and were even in on the party and playing tambourines and bongos, so it was a spirit of a party type thing. And the idea was really kind of novel, right?
Hey, and you said, Carl, you were telling me we see him with the girl on there, but it's not his wife, right? Right.
And I was going to actually, talk about that when we get to Mountain of Love, because there's a spot specifically to that. Let me go ahead and give a little bit of album context now. It was released November 8th, 1965. Went number 6 in the U.S., number 3 in England, and it was their highest charting thing in England to point at that. Real important. Little Girl I Once Knew, a standalone single was recorded in October, I think, and released shortly after the Party album was released, and on November 22nd, right before Thanksgiving, backed with There's No Other from the Party album. And this was supposed to kind of be the single. Because Brian was working on Little Girl I Once Knew and also the beginnings of Pet Sounds. But what happened is well, let me get back to Little Girl I Once Knew. It was released December 22nd. What happened is it has dead airspace in it. We haven't got to that yet, but DJs were frustrated with it, so they kind of quit playing it, and they automatically kind of picked up the Party album and started playing, I guess.
What do you mean dead airspace?
When we get to talking about Little Girl I Once Knew, which might be our next episode with some other things, there's dead air in it that really confused DJs at the time.
Like, you mean just like nothing being
played?
Nothing
for like a whole bar.
Oh.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. That much silence, and then it comes back in again. And so it was a frustrating thing. They'd stop it accidentally when it wasn't done. So they were frustrated. They started playing Barbara Ann off the Party album, and somebody at Capitol Rush released Barbara Ann as a single without the Beach Boys knowing about it. The Beach Boys found out, I think literally hearing it on the radio. So it wasn't their move, and it wasn't something they were wanting to do. But that thing in early '66 went to number 2 in the U.S. and number 3 in England. So it was a huge hit, right? Long story short, Capitol wanted something for the holiday season from Brian because the Christmas and the concert thing had been so successful the year before, right around that time. And so they thought, how can we do something else that kind of celebrates the spirit of getting people together? I even kind of looked at it like, the orange from the Party album, and the orange on the, maybe trying to tie some of the marketing stuff in there. But Party ultimately is a compromise. It's to buy Brian time to work on Pet Sounds. And it's also to satisfy Capitol because they want product. And I think it was Brian, they wanted another live album. He goes, no, we did that just last year. And it was Brian's idea. He says, how about I give you a live album in the studio? So This is, and it's even, a lot of publications released books that I read right now, and they reference this as the first unplugged album. Where you have a major act sitting around with just acoustic guitars and singing and playing music. This is, when we talk about Brian being first in a lot of things, but I never thought about that when I was a kid. But in retrospect, it's like, wow, that's pretty dang cool. They recorded the tunes first in kind of regular loose studio sessions, and then they had a subsequent session or two where they actually brought in a bunch of their friends and wives, and they listened, the sound effects, clanked beer bottles together, sang along, did some of their vocal overdubbing while it was going on, and then even I think some of the instrumental overdubbing, like maybe some of the bass stuff, might have been done while that party was happening.
And definitely some of the talking in between songs.
That was a lot of it was just the dialogue from the party.
Yeah, from the party. Where they were over.
I think what happened is they recorded all the tunes, and then Brian and Chuck Britz, the engineer, they went in and sequenced the tunes. And you can actually, this brings up, this was I can't remember what year it came out, but this is basically the box set for Party. This is 2 discs of the whole dang thing. And on this is the whole Party album without the Party overdub track on.
Oh, so that'd be interesting to see, actually, to hear.
Playing the tune straight through without the Party going on.
And so without the Party, is the conversation between the Beach Boys themselves, or is it just like are the recordings actually just like purely just music? Like there's a little bit of dialogue on the recording stuff that you'll see. Oh, that came from the sessions. Got it. Okay.
But then they also knew what was in there, and so they'd probably already thought of funny things to say to the thing that they knew was coming up on. They were able
that they were saving for when they did that.
Yeah.
Hey, I got a question. So like this, so you said Brian and somebody else went through all of these, and
Chuck Britz, their main engineer in those days.
And essentially they decided, like, here's what we're actually going to put on.
Here's what the order of it is going to be. And so they were living with that, and then they just went and put that on in the studio with speakers playing back with a big party going on.
Was there anything that didn't make did they record anything?
Yeah, is there anything you loved on there that you're like, oh, I wish that would have been on there?
Oh, and there's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
there's a lot of material that did not Ruby Baby, Smokey Joe's Cafe, a really nice version, not a mocking version of California Girls. I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Stones.
What do you think? Have you heard anything about their criteria? What they decided, like, this is what made us make these choices?
I think you just you look at the list, and when we get to it, I mean, it boils down to some of their favorite stuff, and they had a history with some of the tunes, and we'll actually get into that question in just a little bit. Before we get into the album, I want to talk about the band that's being used. There is no wrecking crew here except for Hal Blaine, who comes in and plays the bongos sometimes and maybe some other percussion. It's Carl and Al on 12 and 6-string guitars. The 12-string that is being used is a nice Guild. It's a nice guitar. I kept saying my guitar is nicer than I was overplaying that, but it's probably still true. And then they're also using I see a picture of Carl. It's from the box set, but it's still pictures from the party sessions, right? And he's playing a Martin guitar that's more of a dreadnought size, but it has big shoulders. I've seen the model before, but I'm not sure what it is. But so the guitars that they're using are nice guitars. Although the funny thing is, on the sessions, Al is griping about one of the guitars they're having to use, and he says to Carl, he says, man, have you tried that other good? That one stinks. It's hilarious. And probably you were thinking, well, weren't they their guitars? No, it might have been just something that the studio had. That's recording studios often have selections of acoustic, and it probably was. I've never seen them with those particular guitars again. You know what I mean? So it might have been something they weren't used to those guitars.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So them on the guitars, then you've got on the bass, it's Bruce, some on the bass. And I think when he's playing, it's probably live with the band. And then Brian plays the bass on some stuff. And then I think Carl even does a little bit of overdubbed bass playing on the record. Then on the bongos and the tambourines, you've got a lot of their friends and people like Terry Melcher, Ron Swallow, even Dennis and Brian would take turns on the bongos. A lot of different people on those instruments. The harmonica that you hear every once in a while, a lot of it's Dennis playing the harmonica, but on Mountain of Love specifically, it's Billy Hinchy, a very young Billy Hinchy when they had just met him. So that's really cool. And then the only other thing I want to say is there's a lot of Marilyn, her voice on this record. Okay. She's singing with them. So anyway, that's album context. And here we go with Hully Gully. Who wants to start?
Hully Gully. This, as I always say, I have a song that will always, when I listen to these, an album over and over again, one that always gets stuck in my head, and this was the one. This one took the place in, like, when I'm just brushing my teeth or whatever, just like, just like over and over again. But, this, as far as, like, I don't know, musically, this is, where I mean, like I said, you're going to hear this a lot from me on this one. I just don't have a lot to say on a lot of these, and I don't know, I'll let John say what he has to say about this one.
Yeah, it goes back to what I asked Matt about, like what became their criteria for it. Like I hear you say there was a really solid California Girls, like not as it almost seems to me like more so than most Beach Boys albums that there's the same sound to me on a lot of stuff. And it might be the unpluggedness of it, and it might be, but even like you look at Bob Ran and I Get Around and whatnot, like it's like everything feels like, let's make this less about our incredible sound that we've always had. Not that it wasn't great sound, but it's more like, let's make it more about the party than about the sound.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's where and that's what I notice is the theme, like, and it's probably where you're coming at, is like it doesn't stick out to me musically as much because a lot of them have that same feel to a lot of the songs.
Yeah, and actually that, along the same lines, that actually was kind of I don't know if I'd say a frustration, but I was kind of hoping to hear, what the I Get Around and Little Do Scoop in a unplugged, like, more serious setting, because I mean that like they really just kind of screw off on that one, and so that was kind of a disappointment. It's like, oh damn, I wish I would have. This would have.
I've heard other people say that too.
But like literally, like, I mean, like a total joke how they sing it.
Funny you say that's my least favorite because I like it so much. Like it's just like. But I think it goes to what Matt's talking about, and I learn something every time I listen to like Matt talk on these different things because he's so well versed in it. Is like, hey, we want to make this feel like a party.
Yeah.
We want, like how Christmas album was so great at Christmas time. This is going to feel like a party. And I think with that, they're like going, this makes it to the public. We might get more buys by people going like, hey, it truly is a party. Look at, although how much staged was it as compared to
nobody knew those things in those days. And they knew that he was going to craft it just like he did the concert album,
Well, and another thing too is like, I kind of think about like, I don't know how much this applies so much anymore, but with back then, like a party of like people just jamming, with acoustic unplugged stuff, that probably was a really cool party type thing to do. This is
probably not far off from what it sounded like in the Wilson's Den when they were getting around for Christmas time. I'm telling you, this sounds like a party at my Uncle Sam's house on 26th Street in the big room out, but like we're all singing along. It's all it's a sing along too.
It's sing along, and I think that's
meant for people to sing along to it. Right?
And I even I think it was your dad's birthday or something where you guys and your dad, you all jammed and the whole family was around, and it's like, that's like I think for that era, that's probably something that was what you did.
Lots of people, that was more like the family entertainment type things, One of the things, before we get too far, we were going to play clips of the original tunes, and we right before the episode we decided that Adam go ahead and mention why we thought it would be cool, because we know a lot of people haven't heard the originals of some of these things.
So obviously there's a ton of covers on here, and so Matthew, he's like, how we like to play Beach Boys music, and so you can have it fresh in your mind when we talk about it. And so we were going to play some of the covers. However, we don't know if the copyright owners allow those to be played. You know, the thing about Beach Boys music is you can play it. Any money you make from the YouTube ads, it goes to the Beach Boys. So we didn't want to mess with that. We do recommend that you do go because we did. We sat, the three of us sat around and we pulled up a couple of the originals, and it was really cool to compare the two.
Some of it's really close, and some of it's like way different.
Yeah. Well, this is a simple tune, guys. This is a very simple 12-bar blues type deal. The Olympics were a doo-wop group from the 50s, and this is just an old tune for Brian. Brian would famously did this tune several times at high school assemblies, and one time for a gal named Carol Hess, who was running for school president, and he just took the Hully Gully thing and wrote new lyrics to it and made a campaign song for Carol Hess. Then there's also other people have made Hully Gully into another song, like I think there's a peanut butter, so it's one of those types of tunes, right? It's not my favorite tune at all, It's just, I think it has a history with Brian, and so that's how it got on there. It was just an old one that he had worked with and probably had an affinity and, just a soft spot in his heart for. It's the harmonies when you get, the first thing when you hear the harmonies, and everything's thick because they're singing it and then they're doubling it at the party thing, and who knows if they might have doubled it in the studio, so it's really thick, and there's also Bruce in there, right? It's loose and casual from the get-go. The album starts, you're listening to noises from a party. Yeah. And Brian says, we'll have Greenwich Village just like that, just all this, there was not another album in that time period that was starting like that, so it's going to get the listener was probably going, what the hell?
Yeah.
So in the humor from the very beginning with Hully Gully, this whole album is, again, it's an expansion of Brian's humor. Brian thinks it's funny probably making an album like this and selling an album like this.
Yeah.
And knowing that the whole thing is a construction.
Yeah.
That type of deal. So anyway, there's Hully Gully. I should have known better.
Wait, and Hully Gully was the Olympics?
The Olympics.
Okay, yeah.
I'll start on I Should Have Known Better. This is the first of 3 Beatles tunes that are on this, which I think is so cool. It's right in the Beatles' heyday, and it takes a lot of, I'll say it, balls to go ahead and cover some Beatles tunes. But Carl was a big Beatles fan, but really all of them were. And you can hear Carl and Al real good on here. Of course, they're playing the guitars. I've always liked this cut of I Should Have Known Better. John, you got anything?
Yeah, it was always a song that I enjoyed listening to. I don't know that, sad to say, like, we weren't huge Beatles fans growing up. You were probably more so than me. Mm-hmm. Like, I had what was in front of me, the albums that Mom and Dad had in the house. So I Should Have Known Better, to me, was always a Beach Boys song, not a Beatles song. You know what I mean? It's kind of crazy. Like, and then you find out later, like, that, and then you get to hear it and go. But it's always a song I liked. I would say definitely it was like many songs, it's an easy song to sing along to and play and have a good time with. But it is one that I love.
A good one to get out the 12-string, because there is lots of acoustic. Lots of 12-string acoustic on this. I mean, just the. That's, to me, that's like a signature. That just going back from those 2 chords is like. That sounds like the party record, and if it wasn't, it's got to be a 12-string too.
Yeah, it's the Beatles version's cool too.
Oh, I love them both. I probably on this particular one I prefer the Beatles, but Adam, anything?
Yeah, this what's funny is I was sitting there and when I was listening, I was just like, normally I just listen and then something pops in my head, I write it down. I literally have nothing written down on this one. Uh-huh. It's just like, this is nice. Like, this is good. Uh-huh. But there was nothing, like I said, that's kind of the theme of this album. So for me, this one, but I at least have notes, at least something on all the other ones, but this one, it's a blank. So
I didn't have much on it either.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I remember more the talking in between from when I was a kid than
and if
almost
there's anything specific to a song, make sure and cut me off and say, I remember in this one spot where they say
the sad thing is I don't remember sometimes which talking was between which songs. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, like
you could bring it up anytime.
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, Tell Me Why. Now this is different for me than I should have known better because, well, number one, man, the singing is thick on this baby. This, certain tunes, it really stands out. But this is Tell Me Why and Barbara Ann were both on Spirit of America. So I've heard this and Barbara Ann, John and I both have. These were the earliest party tunes that we knew. And I always forgot, I thought this was a Beach Boys tune, just like John forever. I had no idea. I love this version of it. I prefer it to the Beatles version. I like the extra harmonies. I don't know who's playing bass on this baby, but the bass line is just smoking hot and good on this. And they're just swinging like hell on it too.
Now, what kind of bass are they playing?
A Fender P bass.
Oh, okay.
That's all through the whole thing. Just that white P bass that Brian's playing on the same one.
Okay. Wow. Cool.
It's got a knob missing on it. If you look at the picture and if you look at it in the party sessions, it's the same one. Same white bass.
Oh, nice, cool.
As thick as could be, though, I think that they filled in some stuff over the top, like you said afterwards.
Well, no, they were doing that all the time.
Yeah.
And so literally on this, I think you could have possibly double tracking in the studio, and then they're singing going when they're having the party back. Yeah. They have mics set up so they can actually go up and sing during the party. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of gang vocals. It's supposed to sound like a big sing along.
Yeah.
Right? So you got, there's not that many harmony parts to sing, but you've got lots of guys doubling parts. And I think it's cool in here because I know Bruce's texture is in the falsetto. Sometimes, like when Brian's singing another part, and everything, it's like, oh, remember, Bruce and Al could both go up there at that point too. So anyway, all right, Adam, start with Papa-Oom-Mow-Mow.
Yeah, that's I really liked this on the concert album, and I liked it here too. They seemed very similar. Like they didn't, they didn't seem there was like much difference in the versions. But I like this one there. I like it here. It's just I like the song. I think is just what it comes down to, which is by the River.
The Rivingtons.
Rivingtons
had a hit with it. I think in the late 50s, but they're another doo-wop group.
Yeah,
that I think Mike was real fond of.
Yeah,
the Rivingtons even sounded a lot like the Beach Boys. Like when you listen to the Rivingtons, like the whole setup of the song, like it's very, very similar.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, like sometimes Brian will take Bobby Freeman's "Do You Want to Dance" and totally reinvent it. It's not even the same songs, but every once in a while, Brian will do a cover, and it's like dead faithful to the original. It must be because there's something he really digs about those original arrangements,
Yeah.
Yes. I've got Brian is just shredding on his lead, and I can tell it's double tracked, so he probably did that at the studio. But I always have loved the piece of dialogue that Mike, it says, "Can't seem to remember all the words."
Yeah.
I remember that in Alley Oop too.
Like
Alley Oop. I remember there was one line where he
just botches it.
Yeah.
And so I guess in that case, that's just they
wanted it. That's what happens at a sing along in a party.
Totally. So,
nobody remembers all the words. Everybody's always having to, That's the way it happens.
Yeah, so it's pretty genuine in that sense.
It really is.
Yeah, totally. It's because that was one of my questions overall of the album. Is like, how genuine is this party setup? Which it's like, I'm glad you said that they, were able to draw the distinction that they did record it and then kind of played it and played with it a little bit, but. I don't think that takes away from the genuine aspect of it.
I think you start to dig into it. The concept's pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
It's just it's a standalone product in the Beach Boys catalog that just how can you can't really. It's just
unique,
its own thing.
Yeah, totally.
Really. And so
Mountain of Love.
John, you want to start with Mountain of Love?
As far as Mountain of Love for me, like. I just think it comes down to that again, that sing along, that it's just a cool version. I think that it's a song that I hadn't heard a whole bunch And who'd they?
It was a guy named Harold Dorman wrote it, but it was a hit for Johnny Rivers.
I got you.
Same guy that had it hit with Chuck Berry's Memphis, and a lot of hits. I mean, Johnny Rivers had a ton of stuff. Secret Agent Man. You know, those two. So he was like the current hit with it, and Brian was a big fan of his. What were you gonna say about it?
No, I thought it's just a cool song. It's a song that one of these songs from the Beach Boys that you just aren't going to hear a whole bunch unless you know the Party album, which there's certain songs that are played a million times. But you'd have to know the Party album a little bit to hear Beach Boys' Mountain of Love. You know?
I do like, I think it's probably Carl, but I love the riff he's playing on the 12-string. And I don't know if that was a production element of Johnny Rivers' version or not, but it's just a groovy little riff. I think it's a strong tune on the album. It's not a terrible favorite of mine. I mentioned that Billy Hinchy is playing harmonica on this one. In the middle, they cajole him. They go, "Oh ho, Billy." Oh, you know, if you hear they're kind of doing the background voices or saying stuff like that, and they're saying other stuff too, but I'm not quite sure what it is. But so the Beach Boys met Billy, Dino, Desi, and Billy in 1965. They famously played the Hollywood Bowl together. But Billy, they started opening shows for the Beach Boys. But somewhere real quick, Carl became really good friends with him, and also Billy had a really pretty sister that Carl was really fond of. And so I always wondered, he might have not met her, because the girl that Carl is pictured with is not Annie on here, and I don't see any pictures of Annie in the photos anyplace, but maybe he hadn't quite met her yet, or maybe just real early in the relationship. But I figured I find it's strange that her kid brother's in very young, getting a harmonica solo on a Beach Boys record, you know.
Which the harmonica was great. I love that. I loved the harmonica from the very beginning. I'm like, oh yeah, let's do it. Let's go.
I don't know, but you know what I mean. If he didn't have the hot sister.
Maybe that doesn't happen.
Yeah. That's where I was trying to get. I was trying to be funny, okay? So anyway, did you have anything to say about Mountain of Love, Adam?
No, it was just that harmonica. Obviously, that's like the one thing that really stuck out musically. You know, this is kind of the exception, because that harmonica, it's like, oh, all right, let's go.
So now we've got the third of 3 Beatles tunes. And this is a Lennon-McCartney, but underline, this is more of a John Lennon tune, and I've always loved this tune anyway. I love the Beatles version of this, but I've always had I love Dennis's lead vocal on it, and this song was actually done live by Dennis for like the next year or two in Beach Boy concerts, making it the only tune outside of Barbara Ann. I guess you could say Little Scoop and I Get Around too, but the only song that was performed from the Party album live. Do you know what I mean? Okay. So they, like, literally Dennis would come out like he used to on The Wanderer, you know, but he'd come out front and sing this tune in like 66, you know, like after Pet Sounds was out. What I don't like is the shouting, "Hey!" I think that was supposed to be funny, like something that would happen at a party. Like, I can see that happening where you got a buddy that's over playing his guitar and there's some other guys in the corner trying to kind of crumb his hustle.
Yeah.
You know, and they're, you know, so it's kind of like that. And I think it's a real pretty cut other than that. Yeah.
It kind of doesn't fit really with the tone of the song. I guess the vibe of the song to have this kind of abrupt, hey, you know, I don't know. Like,
certainly that's the thing that sticks out to me most about this song, because, you know, we're talking from a 10, 12-year-old's perspective of what do you remember about this album. Of course, I've listened to it several times since, but my most vivid memories are from that 10 to 12-year-old range. And this is the song where I really started to feel like, oh, they're really partying here. This is like Uncle Sam's House on Irene, because until I heard the hey, and I start to hear more of the party with the rest of the tracks as you keep moving forward.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it was one of those where
it's like when as the party gets louder,
like
the more alcohol that's consumed.
Yeah, exactly. And I wonder if that's what they were going for. Like I honestly do, because you start to get into, I get around later on, and you start to go like, hey, they're really screwing around now. Yeah, and that's now side 2. So it's like this is the start of like
that's actually a really
the
good
alcohol
point.
is really flowing at this party now.
And, I mean, we've all been there when you get to the party and it's kind of quieter, and then an hour and a half in, it's like you're yelling at each other because like that's a really good point. Maybe it's like a subtle thing.
They take you guys are cracking me up, because then I'm jumping ahead to thinking, after Devoted to You, which is the last song on side 1, then they take a little break and somebody chugs a beer and they come in to do alley-oop.
Yeah. It really becomes more, and I wonder how much that was constructed versus this really just happened in this matter.
Way,
how much
a lot of it is the answer to your question.
A lot of it was constructed.
Oh yeah. And just premeditated.
Yeah.
Just hey, the songs are going to be this order. We know what we say on those session tapes, and here's what else we can say. And by the way, everybody else at the party, just say whatever you feel like saying, and do whatever you want to do. If we don't like it, we can cut it out
if we need to.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of them taking beer bottles, and like in the beginning of Alley Oop, I think dun, dun, they also say that could be Al hitting one of the ashtrays, because some of the guys there were some cigarette smokers around, and they said Al was hitting an ashtray. Maybe that's the sound you hear in the beginning of Alley-Oop. But there's lots of bottles clinking together through the whole deal.
Going back to what you guys originally talked about, though, like, does it take away from the song, the hey? No question. Because it's pretty cool what Dennis is doing. However, it's starting to make you feel the party.
It adds to the party party aspect of it. Yeah.
Very good. Devoted to You.
Yeah, which is funny because it's a slow song, and this is in the majority of my slow songs that I'm just not a big fan of. The cover,
yes, Everly Brothers.
Everly Brothers. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'll let you take it away because this is just this one.
Well, I've got in the notes. This is back to Angela Mesa, I think, Presbyterian Church Choir rehearsal. Brian and Mike's sister Maureen, a lot of the time, would go to like a Wednesday night deal where they'd have choir practice, and on the way home, they'd sing Everly Brothers tunes. And Brian and Mike were huge into Everly Brothers and did a lot of their tunes together for fun, all of the Everly tunes. Mm-hmm. But when they'd walk home with Maureen, she's the one playing harp on Surfer Girl, and they'd add a third part, so this is, the Everly Brothers are deep with the Beach Boys, and this is kind of an obscure Everly Brothers tune. It's really cool. There's no drums on here. There's just guitar and bass, so it makes it real mellow. And Brian tells her, if you don't know it, so shut up and go home, which is really, that was probably at the party.
Yeah.
So, and then it's just real pretty because it's just Brian and Mike. It's not anything real groundbreaking other than it is a pretty tune. I think that and Hide Your Love Away and There's No Other are probably the 3 prettiest things on the album.
Yeah.
And that I think that's about all I have on that. Anything from you on this one, John?
Yeah, I hear so little of, like, it's funny that You've Got to Hide had the stuff injected into it, whereas this song gets very little injected into it. It's more just like somebody who's making decisions said, let this one flow through.
Well, and it's like Brian says that to make it look like he told everybody to shut up. Now I'm going to tell everybody to shut up.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. That's probably, like, I remember him saying that at the start, and everybody did kind of get quiet and said, we're going to let this thing roll through.
And in the very end, the way, it's almost like a little lullaby. And it is like, then there's the break. That's the end of side 1. And then they come in just throttling with Alley-Oop. Should we get into Alley?
Yeah, let's do it.
The old, originally done by the Hollywood Argyles. We dialed up a little bit of it before because I don't think John had heard it before.
I'd never heard it before, and it sounds 50s to me. That did not sound 60s sound to me.
Yeah. But I think it might. I'll look it up. It could have been a hit in 61. But it might be 58 too. I can't remember.
I'll tell you what, this song, like, I was a side 2 guy for me. It was just cool as could be. Everything about Alley-Oop was what I liked, and it
was probably my favorite thing as a kid.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
They do a little like how he says monsters in there. It's like kind of like an ode to like Monsters Mash kind of a little bit.
No,
like,
that's the original lyric.
No, but I mean the way he says it. It's kind of like unless that's the original is said like that because he kind of changes. He changes how he says it a little bit.
There's a lot of different vocal inflection things going on in here.
It almost seemed like it was like it reminded me of like
great big monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with the original one, but I think that obviously is done for some sort of a reason.
Yeah, totally.
I think it's Bruce on the bass, and he is just boom, 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 boom.
I love
grooving, and it's apropos for it to say here, caveman rock.
Who goes? Hey,
that's Brian. That's why I've got that down too.
Dude, that's really cool.
What I say,
it's starting to really party, and then Brian's falsetto on the alley oop, like super cool how he came in so strong on that. And I think Mike, as much as I dislike his inflections on I Get Around Again, going back to that, I liked how he altered some lyrics and some inflections on alley oop, like how he just mixed in some of his, because he's a mean motor scooter. Yeah, a bad go-getter. You know, like there's just some things that he does. I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like it. Bearcat Stew. That's the original. I had to make mention of, but I went to the Sam Houston State University, and we were the Bearcats.
Oh,
damn it. Okay, but I also love when Mike forgets the words going into it. If I just grizzly bear, and either Carl or I think it's Carl, he cracks him up.
Yeah.
He's playing the. You could hear him go, ha. Yeah. And I mean, those are it really is.
I think Mike said, right during the track goes, forgot the words.
Yeah. There's several times in this one tune, I think, where he forgets it. The one thing, so Mike's got this voice he starts using in the end Valley Oop it's an effeminate voice, and he's so we'll just leave that alone. But before people criticize that too much, remember this is the 1960s, and this was not done with a heavy hand, and this was more of the main landscape of humor than people would want to admit.
Yeah.
It was not out of the ordinary, and wasn't. I've had people tell me, said, he's kind of, well, that was done. That was done. A
lot of worse stuff going on.
Right, exactly. So, anything on Alley Oop, Adam?
No, just that one little monsters thing that just like that was like what caught my attention. It was like there's that a little throwback there.
Okay, so we get on to There's No Other, which was. Okay, so it's a Phil Spector, the Crystals. Didn't we figure it was the Crystals?
Yes, the Crystals. Yeah.
Okay, and it's a pretty faithful cover to that. But I think Brian really liked it. The singing again is really thick on this one, really thick. And so this was the B-side, going to be to Little Girl, which I think was, hey, we're doing a party album, but we don't want the single to be a goofy party album thing. So let's put out Little Girl I Once Knew, backed with There's No Other from the party album.
So
right?
just real quick, take a second here. When you say like a B-side of a song.
B-side of the single, because you have A side and B-side.
B-side of a single, okay.
So Little Girl I Once Knew.
So when someone uses that reference in any music, like, or any song, that is just like a pairing of a song?
Well, that was, in those days, it was certainly the A and B side of a 45 single.
Okay.
But now you'll hear a lot of people talk about B-sides to generalize. Maybe they aren't top tier, really known tunes. They're more B-sides.
Okay.
Does that make it? That's probably where you're hearing that a lot. But here,
it's an
where I'm saying it was
A and B.
Yes, when we talk about Don't Worry Baby and I Get Around, we were just talking about Don't Worry Baby gets the A billing on the sleeves. Thing, not I Get Around, but that's the A and the B side of that single is I Get Around.
In this context, it's actually
this one. And my thinking is he was working on Little Girl I Once Knew and really liked it, and so they made this album, but he didn't want to have the single be a party tune. So here's this new single I'm working on. Let's put it out. Put one of the party tunes on the back of it. And then what happened is the radio guys got frustrated with it and started playing Barbara Ann off the party album. So
I got a question for you based on 45s that you might know. So cassettes, it seemed to me, and I could be off here, started becoming pretty big in the late 70s.
Yeah.
Probably right in there. About what time?
Early 80s.
Late 70s, early 80s. The album, like up to then, and I completely agree with you, Matt. Like, the coolest thing about albums that everybody's forgetting, and one of the reasons I think it's making a huge comeback is all of a sudden the artwork. Everybody's looking at this stuff, and you go to all of a sudden these different stores, and even to a Walmart, and it's become a huge section where you can buy the vinyl, and the showcase is the artwork, and everybody's getting back to that, and everybody's loving it. But at what time? It seems to me as a kid, we'd even buy 45s on occasion, didn't we? Like,
it's because we'd find them in like the ones that I remember getting. We'd find them at yard sales.
I got you.
And they weren't selling a lot of 45s. Kind of they'd hit their heyday in the 60s.
Got
so
you.
by the time me and you were in the early 70s, when we were listening to this,
kind of done.
45s have been phased out, but they were still releasing they were still like. Ceylon Sailor from all those, they were 45s, you know, so they were doing, but the 45 heyday was done by the 60s.
Like, educating someone like me in this, like a band would release a single on a 45 in hopes that it would make a quick climb up the charts.
There's a whole bunch of different reasons. Sometimes they'd record sometimes they'd release a single after an album had come out because it was really popular off the album.
Ooh.
Or they had tunes that they really liked that they knew were going to be on the album, say, hey, this is going to be a feature on the record, so these are going to be the singles, and we'll put these on the album. But with last episode, we just got to talking about all the real strange stuff with Help Me Rhonda, being that the first Help Me Rhonda was on Today, and then he decided to re-record it and then have the hit with it, and then it's I've already covered this and people want to shoot me, but Bruce actually, he said, no, you need to put the hit version of Help Me Rhonda on Summer Days too, because I think it'll sell that album better. And he's probably right, but Brian didn't want to because it had already been on Today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
and rarely did they do that, put it on multiple albums, did we?
Yeah, and there's a lot of different contexts for when singles came out. Before, like in the Surf and Safari, an album wasn't considered really a serious art form. It was way more people were buying singles than they were buying the albums in those days. They were going out and buying, the Surf and Safari single and like that's when people were buying those. A lot of them weren't buying albums to begin with. Albums were kind of new territory.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, a lot of that early stuff too just seemed like filler songs around some singles.
Right. And then by the time we get into these, especially 65 with Today and Summer Days and all that, the albums are just full of great stuff.
Everything, across the board. Yeah.
So anyway,
a little tangent there. So there's no other Like My Baby. It's what got us on this,
right? And it is one of the album highlights too.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's
and
actually my favorite.
So rich.
Well, we started to talk about this originally, or started talking about this before we started the episode here, and I thought that whoa, like the like I can't even do it.
Whoa,
yeah,
that word that comes in right before they start the main.
Yeah,
chorus,
I thought that was Carl because it reminded me so much of Darlin'. How he goes into doing that same thing on Darlin', but it's Brian.
Which, yeah.
Which is kind of. That was kind of shocking to me because I could have sworn like I like to do with all these, figure out who's singing what. I could have sworn that would have been Carl because it sounds so similar.
Maybe and a couple years later it might have been.
Maybe let me throw just throw
that up
on there. We haven't played
go.
anything yet today, so let's see if I can get this here.
There's a story.
One of the guitars is kind of out of tune.
It's quiet in the background.
But when it comes in here,
so right here, like I can hear Darlin' on the like right after that. I hear Darlin'.
No, they're super thick.
Yeah. They're all. It's like Surfer Girl. It's like there is no real lead vocalist because they're all at this point of the chorus. They're all singing.
Yeah.
So it's like where you, and then But then they break out. Let's listen to a little bit of Brian's lead by himself. He's really good at him singing.
Walking down the street in a crowd, looking at my baby.
I like that, baby.
Feeling so proud.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's my favorite one on the album.
Yeah,
this one.
I think a lot of people agree with you.
Yeah, and actually, on that note, there's a lot of people that comment on the videos, that they give their favorites and stuff like that. And if you have a comment, we love hearing like what your favorite tracks are. So if you aren't one that comments very often, just throw a comment in there and let us know what your favorite track is on this episode and the other one. We love seeing people's favorites and why it's their favorite. Like that's like some of the comments we like more than others are the ones where it's like people are telling us like why this resonated with them or whatever.
I love hearing other people's Beach Boys stories.
Yeah.
And some of the comments are like little mini personal Beach Boys stories for that. I could think of so many of the people that comment regularly, and I already have a kind of an idea of what they might totally what their bag is.
One, it's and also like you said, perspective too. Like there's been comments that I've read that it's like, oh wow, when I look at it through that lens, I can appreciate that song a little more than I maybe did through just our conversation.
When I say something about it, I think that's so much for people to see in these things, and it still blows my mind of how many different angles I hear people coming about some of the stuff. I read some reviews about the Party album just for fun, and I would not. I mean, they were just horrible. I wouldn't include any of that in any review I had of anything.
Tell us the songs you like, not the ones you don't.
Let's get into what could be the most controversial part of the album.
Oh,
which. And I guess I'm going to let you guys start with this because I'll just bring up the rear on kind of give some context on it.
You can jump on this. I'm just going to say like this if we're going into the medley, the Get Around Little Disc Coupe medley, right?
Yeah.
Get Around. Definitely always has been my least favorite thing on this. And I'm not saying that to downplay anything about the Party, but absolutely, Little Disc Coupe I've always been a big fan of. There's several car songs, but there's things about Little Disc Coupe and how much it was altered. And even going to like, I will say that my biggest problem is when you got the I Get Around and these other guys over here, they're not yet tough. Like, it's just like, I just didn't need to hear, even if part of a party setting, it was just like, I just didn't like it. I never have liked it, even from being a kid. And so it was just one of those things that I sat and listened to, and it'll usually just be a skip, and I'll listen to the stuff that I don't normally get to hear from Beach Boys stuff.
Yeah. Well, and that's along the same lines as the fact that I was looking forward to hearing the unplugged acoustic version of these songs. And what I got was this like joking the whole time, very, very small moments of the actual like song. Like, I don't know, it just was there. I mean, are these the only originals on here? The only originals that are on the whole album, they just screwed off the whole time. So, for me, I don't know, that just kind of, that was a disappointment. So
it's funny because you guys echo a lot of what, and there's an element of me, I remember when I was young, the disappointment too. One of the things I have to remember from a performing musician standpoint though, at this point, these guys literally every concert sing these songs every night. And part of it is just getting it's kind of tired, because it was like me with Asleep at the Wheel. As much as I love some of the tunes that we played every stinking night, it's almost like you just get to where you take them for granted because they're just so much a part of the regular parts of them. And so I think it kind of might have been a little bit of relief, blowing off some steam in that way. But I also like the Beach Boys were really popular at this time, and we've talked about how the stuff like our favorite recording sessions and the Bull session with the Big Daddy, I'm Bugged at My Old Man, they were very willing to make fun of themselves and take themselves not too seriously. And I think that this is a good example of that. I think that there's a lot of Beach Boy humor and personality on this album. And this kind of reflects unfortunately, some of the, they got some goofy humor,
You know what? Hey, I want to add on to that right now. One of the things that sticks out, and I don't remember where it was, but it makes me laugh every time I hear it. And the fact that it wasn't cut is crazy to me. But hey, somebody hit my teeth. Hey, somebody hit my teeth. Do you remember that part of it? I don't remember where
Dang, you've told me something I don't know of. Is it in this medley?
No, I can't remember where I'm pretty sure it's Mike that says it, and he says it pretty loud at the end of a song. Huh. It might have been at the end of There's No Other, but I would have to go back and check, but I thought it might be something that you'd have remembered. But it makes me laugh every time I hear it, and it goes right to that, hey, these guys are not taking themselves too seriously.
Yeah. We're also deep into the party.
Yeah,
they're really drinking now. This is really
fair.
And Mike gets even more ridiculous with the effeminate stuff, and those other guys are pretty. I always thought that was kind of funny that he was able to take that one and just because the other one is my buddies and me were it is tough and it's got attitude, and I'm sure they buy into that. But I mean, here's the antithesis that I find a little bit of humor in that. The other thing that's so cool is Carl and the musicians change up the feel so much. They're turning them into little jazz swing tunes, and Carl is even playing some fancy jazz chords in both tunes, like minor seventh and ninth chords that he doesn't play on the regular ones, to give it that lounge feel. It's kind of like a loungy talk to me, baby. Well, and so they're trying to they're joking around playing lounge music and making fun of their own stuff.
Yeah.
And so I love the one line. Mike sings like Elvis in part of it.
Okay.
Well, I'm not a record babe.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then Carl, right at the very end, before of Little Deuce Coupe, Carl's sitting there. He goes, "Let's do Luau." The very first B-side to Surfing. And just as a joke. You know.
I know. I honestly, when I first heard that, I was like, "Oh, it's Luau. Is it coming?" Is he gonna do it?
So that's. I mean, there you go. And that being said, for the things for the reasons I might find some of it funny and entertaining, I also understand the side of, and there's a lot of people that talk about how they don't like the Beach Boys mocking their own stuff. They say, hey, I like that tune.
Yeah.
I
wanted to hear it in that lounge setting, because I did notice that the music did sound a little different.
I told
obviously
you that
in the unplugged way. So
they did do California Girls in a fairly faithful recreation, which is kind of cool on there.
And then cut it.
Yeah, they got rid of it.
How about the next one? You should start with the Times, or were you going to say something else?
No, it goes from my least favorite to my absolute favorite, because I love you got the girl that says, "You can't hear you, Allie." Before as it's starting.
I think that's Brian, actually. We ought to bring that up.
I think it's a girl.
Bring it up.
Yeah. We can't hear you, Allie.
Is it like Allie, at the very beginning? Is that
at the very beginning?
But it's funny to hear, Matt, you say like this was after. Like, so I wonder, you know what I mean? Like, it's actually, if he pre-recorded this, like, she couldn't hear it, like it'd be just interesting, because
I think that was probably contrived, but we'll go ahead and play it.
One more time.
It takes a little while, the intro, before she says it.
I was going to sing a test song. Sing a what? A test song. It was a protest song until you tried to announce a test.
That was Mike.
I can't hear you, Nelly.
Oh, yeah, it was Brian.
Yeah, then he says it again.
You're right.
That could have been, okay, so they might have known that they had an extra long intro on there before Al started singing it. So Brian knew that he would
just mixing it in after.
Go, hey, can't hear you, Al. Are you going to get going? Or?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
No, this
something in my mind said that was the girls.
But you can hear the girls a lot.
Makes me wonder if the teeth thing really exists in there now.
Well, there's a lot of my moments for me like that too. I mean, I love Al's voice, and I think Al's a great vocalist. I mean, it's probably the best.
Hey, and how he tears into "Come gather around." I mean, right?
He was the folky, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, it was perfect to have him sing a Bob Dylan cover.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like it was. I mean, I understand why it's your favorite, because I mean it matches Bob Dylan's I mean, not obviously Bob Dylan's Bob Dylan, but like it just does a good job of being like Beach Boys, but also with that little like Bob Dylan.
Yeah,
you know, this is another one that was not a Bob Dylan tune to me though, because I really loved it. John and I remember we both loved this tune. I think Sammy liked it too.
I can't remember for sure on that, but I do know I didn't know it was a Bob Dylan tune for years. Much like the Beatles stuff. Like to me, this was a Beach Boys tune because I loved it on the Party album, found out 10 years later it was Bob Dylan.
Sorry about that. I think there's a little descending bass line in it. It's nice, but again, the thing that I don't like the shouts in it, where they're going right, wrong. And then, you know, again, it's like this guy doing his serious tune over in the corner, and some of the chicks are digging him, and then you got the cover guys in the corner making fun of him or something like that. And so it's just, it just like Hideaway. You got to hide your love away. This thing was diminished by that. I feel like, although we are getting deep into the party, and they're also everybody's just participating the way they want to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And another thing is so you hear piano noodling at the end of this, which I think and it says Brian gets credit for any piano you hear on here, which is a very little, and it's the noodling in the end of this and in between this and Barbara Ann. But I believe very much that piano stuff was not during. There was a piano in the studio when the party was going on, and I'll bet you that noodling was done after the fact. And then they go into a little bit of a song called Heart and Solo. Bum ba dum 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 dum. I'll bet you that was done on the party thing too. That wasn't done in studio, right? You know, that was. But I'm trying to think. Did I forget anything on that? I don't know. Anybody else got anything on Times That Are Changin'?
No, I mean it was a close number 2 for me.
Okay, so we got.
I would like to say though that once I did hear the Bob Dylan version, dude, I like them both. Like the Bob Dylan version is so cool in its own right, you know, like and so different from.
It's kind of like Tambourine Man for me. I love Bob's version and I love the Byrds version. Of that, you know.
It just there's just something iconic about his own style and his own voice, like the Johnny Cash, the Bob Dylan of the world that you know, right?
The Willie Nelsons.
You hear this person sing, this is this person. Yeah. And it was cool how Al was able to be Beach Boys type, like you said, but
had it like a Dylan edge to it.
Yeah.
You know, kind of, it definitely had the raw and edgy kind of not normal Al voice, right? So let's go ahead and segue. You had that little snippet of what we call heart and soul. But into the session about this time walks Dean Torrance of Jan and Dean. He had been down the hall. Jan and Dean were recording another album at the same time in the same studio, but he I think the song was called You Really Know How to Hurt a Guy, and it was a slow ballad that Dean hated, still hates to this day. And Jan was working on it, and Dean was pitching such a fit. He said that Jan said, well, if you hate it so much, why don't you just leave? Why don't you? And he goes, well, okay, I will. Okay, I'm going to go down and see what the boys are up to a couple doors down. And so he went in, and he said he happened in, and they asked him right when he got in there. And you hear him talking about a surfer, a drunk surfer. Do you hear the dialogue? I love that. That's Dean. And he was a comedy guy anyway, but he comes in and he suggests Barbara Ann. Jan and Dean, this was when I was going to have you bring up the original for the Regents and then the Jan and Dean version, because I think Beach Boys were more familiar with the Jan and Dean version that had been kind of recent. But he suggested Barbara Ann, and then when they go into it, it's Dean doing the Ba Ba Black Sheep, have you any wool? The minor version of Ba Ba Black Sheep. That's kind of like a play on Barbara Ann, right?
Yeah.
So what on the session tapes is so funny because they're trying to figure out what part that Dean is going to sing, and Mike tries to get him to sing with him, double his part. And Brian, they get into an argument, and Brian says, "No, I want him doubling my falsetto on here. I want him doubling me on the falsetto." We would go from Mike's bass part to Brian's falsetto, but Dean sang the falsetto parts in Jan and Dean too, right? Not as good as Brian,
right?
But still, and it's a little out of tune. And so, but he's basically doubling Brian on that high voice, and it's a signature part of that, Brian and Dean together. We should probably bring that up. But the session tapes, it's so funny. Dennis was not out in the studio. This is probably, maybe, it could have been during the party session, but maybe it was just on an overdub session. And at one point, Dennis turns on the talk back in the studio, and he goes, "Hey, Dean." And they were really good friends. Sing on key. Because geez, man, and I've always knew Dean's always been a little pitchy in his singing. He's never, but you put Brian's really good falsetto up against Dean's slightly different timbre and a little bit out of tune. It's like a 12-string guitar almost, and I think their sound together is just a huge signature of that the record. I do like where Mike in the middle, where Carl is playing something that's not really a guitar solo, but just kind of goofing around on one like he does throughout when he might have a solo. It's just like goofy, just crap on an acoustic. Mike says, I thought he was saying forever, coming from a guitar standpoint, stretch it, Carl, stretch it. Meaning bend the strings, right? And I've seen people, it's actually, he's saying, scratch it, Carl, get aggressive with it.
Oh.
Scratch it, Carl, scratch it. And that's been something that people have talked about for years. It's kind of funny. But the very end of it, Dean Torrance could not be acknowledged to be on that album at the time. He and Jan were with Liberty Records. They couldn't be on a Beach Boy record, and it had happened enough between the two bands, like Brian going singing on Jan and Dean records and vice versa, where the two record companies said, "Okay, no more of that crap, you guys." And so they had to always disguise it, and they couldn't ever say if they were doing it. But at the very end, if you listen to the official Party album, you hear Carl say, "Thanks, Dean."
Nice.
So that's where we are with it.
And this is the first time we see Barbara Ann from the Beach Boys, correct?
Oh yeah.
And then do they go on to record a different?
No, this was it. This was the version that went to number 2
and they never did. They never
worldwide hit. Yes, and then Carl says after that it became the bane of my existence.
Yeah, which I know. This was it. This is the only Barbara Ann.
This was their Barbara Ann, just the party version.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that was my only question on it. I didn't know if they went and did like did a single version or something like that, or
When you think about it from a single perspective of it just being released, when you listen to the single, it kind of opens. You can hear a bottle clank, and then just ba ba ba, right into it. There's something real. I remember hearing the record when I was little, and there's something when you haven't heard the whole Party album. There's something quite thrilling about that Barbara Ann record.
Yeah,
not my favorite song for sure, but there's just something. There's a lot of energy to that record, and I can see what it did. They said in late 1965 or early 1966, the sound of Barbara Ann was just as common as a freshly opened bottle of Coke.
Yeah, jeez, wow. Anything on Barbara Ann from you, John?
No, I just there was not like as much as I Get Around and Little Deuce Coupe. Like I've always kind of liked the Barbara Ann.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean, as opposed to those two. So it's just a good way to probably finish the party for me. So
yeah. Going out on a high note.
Yeah, there we go.
Get the designated drivers lined up.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
There it is. That's the Party album. Thanks, John, for coming and helping us have this conversation.
That was a lot of fun.
He definitely added to this episode especially for me when I looked at my notes and was really nervous about what I could bring to the table.
Well,
here, so.
And when I was thinking about it, John and I, what we really resonate with is like he's talking is a lot of the dialogue.
Yeah.
Because we were so young, and it was, that I do know what he's talking about. A lot of the songs are forgettable.
Yeah. So one thing that I did learn about this Beach Boys party album that in this episode is like how genius it really was. Like yes, it's the unplugged session. Yes, it's an acoustic. You got the party, you got the vocals, you got the two different where they recorded it, the tracks here, and then came in and played it. But John, what you pointed out about the escalation of the party within that is, if that's intentional, I mean that's really genius.
Good point.
Stuff,
I've never heard that before, so that's a really cool perspective.
And maybe that's not intentional. That's just literally how the party went. They were drinking some beers, and then people just got louder, got a little more loose. But I mean, that truly is how parties go. We've all been to enough parties to know that. It's
kind of like the next album, though, Pet Sounds. Everybody thinks that Brian and Tony Asher made that whole album fits together, and it never was really meant to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That they say they didn't have a plan like that.
Right. So
it's so, who knows on this, but whatever it is, I mean, John he identified something in it and I going,
yeah,
definitely.
So speaking of Pet Sounds, we might do Pet Sounds next, or we might do
a mini episode of Little Girl I Once Knew, and that'll include Sandy and Guess I'm Dumb Too.
Okay. We don't know yet. Kind of depends on how our schedules line out.
And then Pet Sounds, and then maybe I might have to do a Good Vibrations standalone release because we're going to do Smile, even though Smile wasn't released, and we'll talk about that later. But I think that looks like it's going to be what's happening for the next few episodes.
Okay, perfect. So once again, we want to take a moment and thank everybody for participating in the podcast, whether it's through a comment, a like, subscription, sponsorship, whatever it is, whatever you're willing to give, we appreciate it, and we're seeing the growth of the podcast really is because of you, the people listening and watching, and so we just want to express how much we appreciate that. If you do want to become a sponsor, QR code link in the description below, and then we'll acknowledge you on the podcast. You can also when you fill out the form, you can, if you want to have a specific podcast topic, you can throw that in there. We have a list going of those, and once we get through all these albums, we'll start checking those out a little closer. So I think that's going to be it for today. Thanks again, John, and then we'll see you next episode. We'll see what that ends up being, but we'll see you next time. Thank you.